Hello, I'm Josh Erickson, and I'm recording from my hotel room in Eugene, Oregon. And what we're going to talk about today is going to be digital foot traffic and what happens when a consumer spends more time clicking than they actually spend walking. What does that mean for the small business? So first we're going to talk about the size of social media networks and how that interacts with small businesses. We're going to talk about how targeted we can become sculpting our message to those massive amounts of users that are on social media. But we're also going to talk about the drawbacks as well. For example, how difficult it is to custom craft a message to millions and billions of users. And also, at the end of the day, who actually owns the data? And if it matters, who owns the data at the end of the conversation? So first, we're going to talk about the actual size of social media networks and how many users we're talking about. Facebook has approximately 1.2 billion active users per month. Now that's just Facebook. That doesn't include Twitter or Google Plus or Instagram or Pinterest or any of the others. Facebook, 1.2 billion. So when a small business has access to billions of people that they can interact with and send their message to, it becomes a very good and healthy thing for that business. A recent study just done that was shown in Business Insider showed that 75% of small businesses being those that have less than 100 employees, are currently using social media to broadcast their message. Now, if that's true, we have to ask ourselves, why are they using social media networks? And I think the answer is pretty obvious to see. It's because with the amount of data that's coming in, they can gain way more information than they could if they were just relying on their own information pool. So, for example, if I pull information from 1.2 million users, I'm going to have a much clearer picture of what the market is asking for than if I just pull those who I've already talked to or maybe those in my city. It gives me a much broader international even perspective. But not just that, I can also target my message to the audience that I'm speaking with. So for example, if I print a billboard, I have to make a really wide message that goes to anyone driving by the billboard. But if I'm advertising specifically to 21 to 25-year-old males in the 67209 zip code who own their homes and love fitness, my message is going to be dramatically different depending on who I'm sculpting that for. The Navy actually found out some really good insights about the sheer volume of data sets and how that can help sculpt a vision for a company. There was a time in their history where the ship captains would sail very zigzaggy courses across the ocean, the current thought being it would be better to sail a longer path that you know than risk the dangers of going on a voyage that you did not know. There was a man that actually solved a lot of this. His name was Matthew Murray, and what he did was went through 2 decades of shipping logs in the early 1800s, cross-referenced all of them to find out the most efficient shipping paths that were safe, and saved lots of time for these ship captains sailing across the country. I know it's odd to talk about 1,800 ships when we're dealing with social media marketing, but the idea is the same. When you zoom out and gather a larger pool of data, you can actually gain better knowledge about a very specific piece of information. So in other words, zooming out to zoom in, or going macro to focus on the micro. What I'm talking about when I'm dealing with this kind of things is if you can pull data from all these social media sites and all of these people that are giving information, you have a much better idea of what it is that the market's asking for. So those are some of the reasons that social media can be very valuable in terms of management information systems, because they're holding all of that information already ready to be consumed by me, the end user, or the small business. But that can also cause some problems as well. It does have some drawbacks. For example, if I'm trying to sculpt an individual message for lots of different smaller segments of people, I've got to be much more specific with my marketing. In fact, a recent study that just came out, I believe it was the Harvard Business Review that did this study, they showed that even though about 75% of small businesses are using social media marketing, only about 12% of them feel like they're getting a really solid return on their investment. It was a fascinating study to me because if social media is the largest if it's drawing the largest amount of money from people spending money for that sort of marketing, you would think would have a much higher return on investment than it actually does. And part of the problem is because people have a hard time sculpting their message to very specific audiences. But not just that. There's also the difficulty of who owns the data. So if Facebook has information on their 1.2 billion users and they hand off a large data set to me, the end user, the problem is I don't know how much of that data they actually gave me because I don't own the data. I can't go to the actual server, pull the information, and know 100% I'm getting very accurate information because I don't own that information. What makes it even more complicated is Facebook is also the organization selling me the product, e.g., selling the marketing to me. They're the one broadcasting my message. So it behooves them, in some instances, possibly to withhold data to make a better data set for me, the end user, to entice me to spend money with their company. Now, I'm not saying that Facebook does that or that Twitter does that, but it does cause a little bit of conundrum since I'm both relying on them for data and spending my money because of the data that I received from them. So if I own the data, I can say with much more confidence the accuracy of said data. Not just that, the user platform itself changes quite often. If you're a Facebook user, you will know that very often you'll hop on Facebook only to realize that it's completely graphically changed, the way you interact has changed, the security features have changed, the mobile platform has changed. As a business owner, if I'm relying on a set of data coming from a network that's constantly shifting and moving and changing, it makes it much harder to refine that data because it's coming in different formats constantly. So there are some drawbacks to using social media data sets as well as social media for marketing, but I really believe the benefits for small businesses far outweigh the consequences of not owning the data sets or the exhaustive task of sculpting that information. So at the end of the day, what happens when users spend more time clicking than they do walking is the small businesses actually win because they have access to a greater audience, which yields better profitability for them. Even though return on investment isn't always where we like it, it's still much better than not investing at all. Thank you and have an awesome day.